love and resentment. In a remote village, there was a beautiful girl named Lan, known for her charm but cursed with an unfortunate fate. She was deeply in love with a young man named Kai, the son of a wealthy family in the village. They swore eternal love, but Kai's mother strongly opposed their relationship, believing Lan only wanted their wealth. After much pressure, Kai gave in to his mother's wishes and ended the relationship with Lan, eventually marrying another woman. On his wedding day, Lan stood from afar, tears streaming down her face. In despair, she sought out Mrs. Ba, a well-known sorceress in the village, feared for her mastery of love charms and dark magic. Mrs. Ba gazed at Lan with piercing eyes and asked, "Do you want him to return to you, or do you want him to suffer?" Lan hesitated for a moment before nodding toward the second choice. The old sorceress smirked, pulled out a straw doll, tied a lock of Lan's hair to it, and wrapped a red thread around its body. Then she began chanting an incantation. Once the ritual was complete, she handed Lan a charm talisman and warned, "In 3 days, he will belong to you forever." Lan left with the charm, her heart filled with turmoil. Little did she know, she had just opened the door to a nightmare far beyond her control. The nightmare begins. 3 days later, strange things started happening to Kai. At first, he suffered from insomnia, unable to eat properly, and constantly felt like someone was calling his name in the wind. Then came the nightmares. Every night, Kai dreamt of wandering through a dark forest, where Lan stood in the distance, her white dress flowing, her eyes filled with sorrow. She called to him in a choked voice, "Kai, why did you leave me?" He tried to run to her, but his legs felt chained to the ground. Lan stepped closer, but her face began to change. Her eyes hollowed, and her skin started to decay. Kai screamed and woke up drenched in sweat. As days passed, his condition worsened. He heard faint laughter in the dark, felt cold hands brushing against his neck, and saw shadows flickering in the corners of his house. One night, his wife woke up to find Kai sitting on the bed, staring blankly, mumbling to himself, "Lan, don't look at me like that." Suddenly his body convulsed, and he dropped to his knees as if forced down by an unseen force, his hands gripping his own throat. His wife screamed and rushed to pull his hands away. When she turned on the light, she caught a glimpse of Lan's reflection in the mirror, her eyes full of sorrow and anger. Kai became a walking corpse, his body weak and his eyes sunken. His family finally sought help from a spirit master. After performing a ritual, the master frowned and spoke in a grave tone. "Someone has used a love charm on him, but not to bind him, rather to torment him." His wife shivered in fear. Who had done this? And could Kai ever escape the curse? A sinful past. Kai's family was desperate. They invited a more powerful shaman to remove the curse. But when he arrived, he merely glanced at Kai and sighed, "This is not a simple love charm. This is a curse of hatred. Once cast, it is nearly impossible to break." By then, Kai was barely responsive, his once bright eyes now dull and lifeless. At night, he spoke to someone unseen, whispering, "Lan, I was wrong. Please forgive me." Rumors spread through the village. One old woman who had known Lan whispered, "Perhaps this is karma. That girl suffered a horrible fate." Kai's mother turned pale. It was then that they learned the terrible truth. Lan was dead. A month earlier, after receiving the charm from Mrs. Ba, Lan mysteriously disappeared. Her body was found at the bottom of a dry well, her eyes wide open, her face twisted in agony. Some said she had taken her own life, while others claimed something had dragged her into the well. Kai's mother trembled upon hearing this. Whether Lan had died by accident or by dark forces, one thing was certain. She had returned to seek vengeance. The shaman's expression darkened. To break the curse, you must find the one who cast it. Determined, the family set out to find Mrs. Ba, but would she help them, and would Lan's spirit ever be at peace? Meeting Mrs. Ba. At midnight, Kai's family journeyed to Mrs. Ba's house, deep in the dark woods. The hut was surrounded by twisted trees, their branches rustling as if whispering secrets. The old wooden door creaked open by itself. Inside, Ba sat motionless in her chair, her eyes dark and hollow, staring at them as if she had been expecting them. "You've come seeking salvation, haven't you?" Her voice was dry and rasping. Kai's mother fell to her knees, begging, "Please, save my son. Lan is haunting him." Mrs. Ba sneered, "Save him? Do you even know what Lan endured?" She pulled out a straw doll. wrapped in red thread, with a lock of Kai's hair still attached. That girl didn't just ask for a love charm, she fed it with her own blood, filling it with hatred. But she didn't realize she was also dooming herself. The truth was chilling. Lan had sacrificed too much, binding her soul to the curse. In the end, it consumed her. At that moment, Kai let out a scream, his eyes rolling back. Mrs. Ba threw a handful of black powder at him. He collapsed, writhing in pain. To break the curse, you must go to the well and retrieve what she lost. What had Lan lost, and was it worth the risk? Descending into the cursed well that night, Kai was lowered into the well. The air grew colder as he descended, and shadows danced along the damp stone walls. At the bottom, he found a small wooden box covered in moss. His hands trembled as he picked it up. Suddenly, an icy hand grabbed his wrist. He gasped, shining his flashlight on Lan's ghostly face, her eyes dark, filled with sorrow. "You left me. Do you know how much I suffered?" Tears streamed down Kai's face. "I was wrong, Lan. Forgive me." Lan stared at him for a long moment before slowly vanishing into darkness. Inside the box was her old wooden comb, the only thing she had cherished in life. The shaman nodded. "Now, we can set her free." The curse is lifted. Back at the ritual, the comb burned into ashes, and Lan's voice whispered a final goodbye. From that day, Kai was freed, but deep down he knew he would never forget her.